There are nights you forget, the moment you clock out, and then there are nights that never really end. They just pause. This was one of those nights. It's funny, you know, I've picked up thousands of people. All kinds. But this one ride, this one memory, stayed with me. It wasn't the destination, not at first. It was the feeling. The kind of quiet that settles in your bones, telling you something isn't right. I should have trusted it. The request came in just before 3 a.m. A simple ping from a side street in West Virginia. The air was thick and damp, a light drizzle blurring the few streetlights still on. It was a Tuesday, the kind of dead night where you mostly shuttle hospital workers or the last few stragglers from a closing bar. The kind of night where you start counting the minutes until sunrise. My headlights cut through the fog, painting the wet asphalt in pale strokes. The old brick buildings of the town felt heavy, like they were holding their breath. I pulled up to the curb. The street was empty. For a full minute, nothing happened. Just the soft hum of my Camry S engine and the rhythmic tap of rain on the windshield. I almost canceled the ride, figuring it was a glitch or a note. Then, a shadow detached itself from a dark doorway across the street. A man, maybe in his late 50s, moving with a slow, deliberate pace. He wasn't looking at my car. He was looking back over his shoulder, into the darkness of the alley he'd just left. He finally crossed the street, opened the back door, and slid inside without a word. The air in the car instantly changed. It got colder, heavier. He brought the smell of damp earth and old, wet wool with him. "Where to?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. I took a long, shallow breath. Before answering, his voice was raspy, thin. The old hospital, Western State. Western State, I typed it into the GPS. The official name popped up. Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. Below it, in smaller text, historical tours and ghost hunts. I glanced in the rearview mirror. His eyes were fixed on the screen of his phone, but it was dark. He wasn't looking at anything. He just sat perfectly still, his hands resting on his knees. There was something profoundly unsettling about his stillness. It wasn't calm. It was rigid, and that's when everything shifted. The drive was short, maybe 10 minutes. We left the small downtown area, and the roads became narrower, flanked by dark woods. The rain was coming down a little harder now, and my wipers struggled to keep up. He hadn't said another word. The silence in the car was so absolute, it felt like a presence. I kept glancing at him in the mirror. He was just a silhouette against the passing darkness, his face obscured by shadows. His head was slightly tilted, as if listening for a sound only he could hear. I've had silent passengers before, lots of them, but this was different. This felt intentional. This was a silence with weight, a silence that was hiding something. I started to feel that familiar prickle on the back of my neck, the driver's instinct that says this ride is off course, even if the GPS says you're going the right way. We made the final turn onto the grounds. The main building loomed out of the fog and rain, a colossal stone beast, dark and imposing. It was immense, stretching out into the night on either side. Even with what little I knew of its history, seeing it up close like this, at this hour, it felt wrong. It felt like trespassing on a grave. The GPS announced, "You have arrived." I pulled the car to a stop near a modern-looking sign that read, "Overnight Ghost Hunts, check in here." A small group of people with flashlights and backpacks were huddled under a canopy, laughing and talking. Tourists. This is where I almost turned the car around. My passenger saw them. I watched his reflection as his entire posture changed. His shoulders tensed, and he leaned forward, peering through the rain-streaked windshield with a look of pure, unadulterated confusion. Then, distress. His breath hitched. He wasn't looking at the building anymore. He was staring at the tour group. "What? What are they doing here?" he whispered. It wasn't a question for me. It was for himself. "Looks like one of those ghost tours," I said, trying to sound casual. "People pay to spend the night in there." He didn't seem to hear me. He slowly shook his head, a look of deep, painful sorrow washing over his face. "No, he said, his voice cracking. "No. This isn't right. This is all wrong." He fumbled with the door handle, his hands shaking. He wasn't here for a tour. I knew that with chilling certainty. He wasn't a tourist looking for a thrill. He was here for something else. Something real. What he told me next still keeps me awake. "I have an appointment," he said, his voice barely audible over the rain. "Visiting hours are until 4. I need to see her." He looked at me then, for the first time. His eyes were hollow, filled with a desperation that went beyond tired. It was an ancient kind of grief. They told me she was waiting. My blood ran cold. Visiting hours. The hospital had been closed for decades. I didn't know what to say. The logic part of my brain was screaming, but the person in front of me was lost in a reality that had ended 30 years ago. He was talking about the hospital as if it were still operating, as if the nearly 2,500 patients were still inside. Not just the ghost hunters with their cameras and flashlights. The air in my car felt suffocating. He wasn't just a strange fare. He was a ghost himself, haunted by a time that no longer existed. I realized then he wasn't telling me everything. He opened the door and stepped out into the rain. He didn't have a coat, just a thin, worn sweater. He didn't seem to notice the cold or the wet. He just stood there, staring at the massive, dark asylum, looking utterly lost. He turned back to me, his face a mask of confusion and heartache. "She was never discharged," he said, his voice breaking. "They promised me she was never discharged." He then reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled, worn photograph. He held it out for me to see. It was old, black and white. A young woman was smiling, her eyes bright. Behind her, you could just make out the same stone walls of the hospital. He didn't wait for a response. He just turned and started walking, not toward the tour group, but away from them, toward a darker, more secluded part of the grounds, disappearing into the fog and the shadows of the colossal building. He walked like a man with a destination, a man going home. I sat there for a long time, the engine idling, the rain drumming on the roof. The ride had ended. The fare was paid automatically through the app. But it wasn't over. I watched until his silhouette was completely swallowed by the night. I thought about calling someone. But who? What would I even say? I dropped the man off at an abandoned asylum because he had an appointment to visit someone who left this world a lifetime ago. I just put the car in drive and pulled away, leaving the tourists, the rain, and the massive, silent hospital behind me. I never got another ride request from that account. Some nights, when it's quiet and the rain is falling, I think about him. I see his face, his hollow eyes, and that crumpled photograph. I think about the woman who was never discharged, and the man still keeping his appointment, wandering the dark grounds of a place that exists only in his memory. The night is full of stories, but some of them don't have an ending. Te Hus Decho. If this felt too real, say something below.